Imagine you wake up tomorrow and your phone says minus 22 degrees outside. No heating, no blankets, no warm food. Just the cold pressing through the walls and one simple question forming in your skull before you are even fully awake. Am I going to make it today? Now hold that feeling. Because that feeling is not new. It has been firing in human skulls for 300,000 years, and the people who felt it every single morning of their lives did not just survive it. They built the world you are standing in right now. This is the story of how ancient humans survived the Ice Age. And the real answer is far stranger, far smarter, and far more human than you have been told. Here is the first thing you need to understand. During the last glacial maximum, roughly 20,000 years ago, average global temperatures were 6 degrees Celsius colder than today. 6 degrees sounds like nothing. But that is the difference between your city and a landscape buried under a kilometer of solid ice. The regions where humans actually lived saw winters that would kill a modern person, in full gear, within days, and the landscape was not empty. It was terrifying. Cave lions prowled the dark, bigger than any big cat alive today. Woolly mammoths weighing 6 tons moved across the plains. Cave bears the size of small cars. Your ancestors were not at the top of this food chain by size or strength. They were at the top by one thing only: their minds. Start with fire, not because it is obvious, but because most people have the wrong idea about what fire actually was. The oldest controlled use of fire in the archaeological record comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, roughly 1 million years ago. By the Ice Age, fire was not a discovery. It was ancient, deeply understood technology doing 15 jobs simultaneously. It cooked food, repelled predators, dried wet clothing, hardened spear tips, and lit the darkness during winters where night lasted 16 hours. Evolutionary biologist Richard Wrangham has spent decades building the case that cooking on fire is literally what made us human. Cooked food delivers dramatically more usable energy per gram than raw food. When your ancestors started cooking, the gut could shrink because it no longer had to do the same digestive work. That freed up metabolic energy, and that energy went straight into the brain. Fire did not just keep your ancestors warm. Fire built the brain you are using right now. But here is the thing nobody tells you about ancient fire. Losing it was potentially a death sentence. In a world with no matches and no backup, the person whose specific job was maintaining the communal flame was not just useful. They were the most important person in the group. Not the best hunter. Not the strongest fighter. The firekeeper. Think about that the next time you reach for a light switch without thinking. Now, let us talk about shelter. Caves were used, and they were genuinely excellent. A deep cave holds a relatively stable temperature of 10 to 13 degrees Celsius, regardless of what is happening outside. Not warm, but survivable when combined with fire and shared body heat. Cave walls also block wind, which in extreme cold is almost as lethal as the temperature itself. But caves were not always where the food was. Animals migrated. People followed. And when there was no cave available, your ancestors did not sit down in the snow and accept death. They built something that will stop you. In modern-day Ukraine, archaeologists excavating a site called Medjugorje uncovered circular structures built almost entirely from mammoth bones and tusks. Femurs, jawbones, vertebrae interlocked into walls, then covered with tightly stretched animal hides. Some of these structures required bones from over 150 individual mammoths. Researchers found hearths and decorated objects inside. These were not emergency shelters. These were homes. Prehistoric architecture built from the skeleton of the largest animal on the continent. The word architecture feels too small, but it is exactly the right one. Here is a question that should bother you more than it probably does. Biologically, you are a naked ape. You have almost no fur compared to every other primate. In sub-zero temperatures, an unclothed human dies of hypothermia within hours. The fact that you exist is almost entirely because of clothing. And the history of clothing is one of the most quietly extraordinary stories in human prehistory. Geneticist Mark Stoneking found an elegant way to date when humans first started wearing clothes. He studied the evolutionary divergence between head lice and body lice. Body lice live in fabric, not on skin. They are a separate species from head lice precisely because clothing created a new niche for them. Based on their genetic split, humans were regularly covering themselves approximately 170,000 years ago. But by 40,000 years ago, simple covering had become something extraordinary. The burial site at Sungir in Russia, dating to about 34,000 years ago, contains 2 children buried with thousands of individually carved ivory beads sewn directly into their garments. Researchers who reconstructed those garments found a 3-layer system: a close-fitting inner layer for moisture, a middle insulating layer for warmth, a tough outer layer for wind and water. Hoods, trousers, boots. This is almost identical to the layered system modern mountaineering guides recommend for cold weather survival. Your ancestors arrived at it 34,000 years ago through pure empirical elimination. Every generation that got it wrong died. Every generation that got it right taught their children. Now here is the part of the Ice Age your body understands without being told. Staying warm in genuine cold burns an extraordinary number of calories. Your metabolic rate in extreme cold can increase by 50% or more as your body works continuously to maintain core temperature. In an Ice Age winter, caloric deficit was not a diet outcome. It was a death sentence. Which is why fat, not protein, not carbohydrates, fat was the supreme currency of Ice Age nutrition. Fat delivers more than twice the energy per gram of any other macronutrient, and it is precisely what the body burns to generate heat. A single adult woolly mammoth could provide near 500,000 calories, enough to sustain a group of 25 people for weeks. But hunting a 6-ton animal with tusks that could kill you instantly required something your ancestors were exceptional at: coordinated group planning under pressure. Drive hunts, ambushes at river crossings, fire and noise used to direct panicked animals toward prepared kill zones. And once the animal was down, everything was used: organs, marrow, fat, tendon, hide, nothing discarded, because nothing could afford to be. Storing that food required another layer of intelligence. Permafrost, permanently frozen ground widespread across Ice Age Eurasia, functioned as a natural deep freeze. Ancient humans dug storage caches directly into it to preserve meat for weeks or months. For shorter-term storage, meat was dried over fires or in cold, dry air. Evidence from multiple archaeological sites suggests these communities also made something very similar to pemmican: dried pulverized meat combined with rendered fat, calorie-dense and shelf-stable for months. The autumn before winter was not rest. It was maximum intensity preparation. The entire group working toward one objective: survive until spring. Not every group tried to tough out the worst conditions in place. Some of them simply left. Evidence for seasonal migration in prehistoric human populations is widespread across the archaeological record. Reindeer herds migrate hundreds of kilometers between summer and winter ranges. Bison herds do the same. The human communities that depended on these animals were not going to remain in a depleted, frozen landscape while every edible thing moved somewhere warmer. In Europe during the Upper Paleolithic, patterns in stone tool distributions show specific types of rock being transported hundreds of kilometers from their source. There is only one explanation. These people were moving regularly between known locations along established routes. They had mental maps of landscapes spanning entire regions. They knew the paths, the seasonal windows, the distances, what to carry. This was not wandering. It was strategic annual movement based on accumulated generational knowledge of an intimately understood world. But perhaps the most underrated survival technology of the Ice Age was also the most invisible. Community itself. Hunter-gatherer bands typically held 20 to 50 people in a core group, with broader networks connecting them to hundreds more across a wider territory. In winter, when every decision had immediate consequences, you needed the person who knew exactly how to butcher a large animal to extract maximum yield from every part. You needed the one who knew which plants still had roots under a meter of snow and exactly where to dig. And you needed the elder who remembered the terrible winter 15 years ago and which valley still held deer when everywhere else was empty. That elder was not a burden. She was a library. In a world with no books and no second chances, her knowledge was irreplaceable. The stories told around the fire during those long winter months were not entertainment. They were the accumulated survival knowledge of generations, encoded in narrative, because narratives are what human memory holds best. Researcher Francesco De Rico has argued that the cave paintings of Lascaux and Chauvet, some dating to 40,000 years ago, may have served partly as visual knowledge repositories. Detailed depictions of local animals, their seasonal patterns, their behaviors, maintained across generations on the most permanent surface of